Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
3, 2, 1, and we are back, and we are fresh from having watched the inauguration of our 47th president.
Yes.
And we are setting aside our normal scheduled podcast content, and we're going to be presenting that tomorrow. But Julie and I decided we want to talk with you about why we do truly believe, and we're going to make this real estate focused, why we truly believe this is the start of a new golden era, not just for our country, but really for the world. And we're going to set the bar really, really high, but trust me, we're going to make it granular so we can really focus in on helping you guys to be educated and motivated. And I think maybe awakening a lot of you to the realization that your best years of your life, and certainly as your life as a real estate practitioner, are still very much ahead of you. So Julie, we just literally walked away from watching this. What are your prevailing thoughts?
Wow, I have so many. The first, I think I'm so thrilled and excited that the inauguration had such a positive outlook and that it was more about what makes us similar as Americans than what makes us different. And the return to the core values that the country was founded on. And that gets back to what's your North Star, protecting our citizens and making, dare I say it, making us great again as a country, right? As our cities and as you talked about westward expansion, that's something we studied.
Manifest Destiny.
Manifest Destiny that we studied back in school when we were learning about how the country was founded. I think maybe a return to tradition. Of course, I'm always a positive sort of traditionalist. I loved all the pomp and circumstance. I thought that was really amazing. I thought, as a fellow musician, Carrie Underwood, wow. I mean, that was a pivotal moment. And I've been in situations where something went wrong with the music or something went wrong. Maybe you forgot your music, but she saved that. That was awesome.
So you guys are watching this too. And what we think happened was the music wasn't playing or something. There was some sort of,
a technical glitch.
A technical glitch. And she just had to basically sing it.
As everybody nervously looked around, what's going on?
And we think we heard her say, God help me or something like that before she started to sing. We'll watch the playbacks.
Yeah, what a brilliant move that she said, you guys know the word sing along.
Yeah, exactly. But,
that was a great moment, I thought.
So what was really special, I think, about that, Julie, is it showed the fact that she was actually singing.
Yes. Honestly, that is the true test of talent, is if you can pull it together. Think about how absolutely nerve-wracking that could have been.
Well, it's easy to accuse some of these singers of essentially not really having a voice.
Lip-syncing, yeah.
Well, not just lip-syncing, but lip-syncing to something that's been auto-tuned. Auto-tuned is you guys maybe know what it is. It's a software app program. The guy that created auto-tune is one of our neighbors.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So in any event, so then you're listening to something that's been modified. It's not really what the person's. It's like a filter on Instagram, basically. So moral of the story is Carrie definitely sang that with her own voice, and
they call that singing a cappella, where it's all up to you.
Yeah, it was magical. I thought the whole thing was magical. I'll tell you what I thought that really moved me was, frankly, moved me to tears a couple times. Was the prevailing, essentially reinforcement that we're one nation under God.
100%.
And the mentioning of God and stringing this back to the founding fathers. Fundamental beliefs about our country and what it's supposed to be all about. That's what that was all about. And there was no divisive language. I mean, you could say Trump's a divisive character, and I suppose in some eyes of folks he is. But really, from what he was saying and how he's positioning things. So, what were the big surprising moments from you? From the things like he only rattled off, I think, 4 of the things he wants to do in his first 100 days. I've seen a partial list of some of the things.
Right.
And we promised to make this about real estate, so let's make it about real estate as much as we can.
Sure.
But I was really blown away about the whole comment about Panama Canal. He said,
yes. Well, and I'm certainly not a Panama historian, but I believe that the deal was the U.S. built the Panama Canal. The purpose of it was to make it so that we could have international shipping without having to go under the
Horn of Africa.
the Horn of Africa, which is how we used to do it. It's a heck of a lot closer if you go through the Panama Canal, but we built it. He mentioned that 38,000 men and women lost their lives in the building of it, and those were American lives.
Right, exactly. And then Jimmy Carter basically just gave it to the Panamanians
with the understanding that they would have control of it, but that it would, be friendly to, of course, American ships. We were the ones that built it, after all.
And it turns out that over time, guess what happened? It not so much, it wasn't that friendly. And now we are obviously, the Trump administration feels that the United States was not getting the treatment that we were promised. And he straight up said, we're going to take back control. Now, I don't know if that's hyperbole.
He said we're going to, quote, take it back. Now, does that mean literally, I don't think we're attacking Panama this afternoon? I don't think that's what he meant. I believe, I've heard a little bit of commentary on this, and I believe that the deal is he's going to simply enforce the laws that were put in place when Carter gave Panama to Panama. Now, subject to change. That's what I've heard is what the deal is going to be. And we'll see how that pans out.
Yeah. And so the whole conversation about Greenland didn't come up, but that's also kind of interesting,
Yeah. We're making it about real estate after all.
Yeah, we're making it about real estate. So Mr. Trump, President Trump, if you're listening, Julie and I would love to be LPs in the new Trump resort in Greenland.
Seriously. Well, but let's have her on Greenland here for a second, because I had that a little bit research for our previous Friday show.
Yep.
Why Greenland? I'm not sure everybody is really tuned into what is this big discussion of Greenland. Are we just going to attack it for fun because it's a big mass of land? No.
Wait, no. You said attack it. That isn't what you meant.
That's what some people will spin it. Oh, he wants to go after Greenland. Okay. So why Greenland, right? Well, it's strategically placed between us and Europe. It's got part of the Arctic, which is important. The Arctic is getting opened up for lots of seafaring and shipping and all that kind of thing. And it has tons of natural resources. I heard an interview last week about somebody who said, we have so much in natural resources. This was I guess they're called Greenlanders, was being interviewed. And he said, in my little town, I can walk down the street and I can pick up a ruby the size of a baseball that's just like, I just notice it on my walk. And lots of other natural resources. So that would be an advantage, certainly. And Denmark, of course, controls Greenland now. And there's already been some discussion. There's historic discussion. This is not just a Trump thing. This has kind of come and gone from the ethos for a while. And so we'll see. Does that mean that, Denmark manages it differently and gives us more priority and authority there? Or, I don't know how that's going to pan out.
Well,
but it's certainly a topic.
Assuming it does, because we already have a military base there. And I guess
true.
we're largely in control of Denmark's actual, we basically protect Denmark,
Yeah.
So the long story short is it's kind of inevitable at this point that Greenland's going to become part of the United States, which is kind of interesting. And you mentioned the natural resources. I've listened to some podcasts, and it was talking about the fact that you mentioned the Greenlanders. I don't know if that's what they refer to themselves as, but they actually feel like they're the redheaded stepchild
to Denmark.
To Denmark, yeah. And that they haven't been getting the respect that they deserve, and they feel like it's sort of a one-sided relationship. So
so who knows how somebody should ask how they actually feel about it.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody says, well, Denmark's not really for sale, keeping it on real estate. At some point, everything is either for sale or negotiable, right? And at least it's a discussion. So that's definitely a story to follow, and it does kind of play into the manifest destiny type of theme.
You know what?
We're
making the assumption that they know what manifest destiny means, and let's just
true.
be honest, that stopped getting taught in schools.
Yeah, it did.
Probably not that long after you and I graduated from high school. So manifest destiny is basically it's a spiritual belief on a religious spiritual belief that humans are Earth was made for humans, and that manifest destiny is that we'll continue to expand and essentially that's manifest.
And it's also particularly an American thing that was a belief of the founding fathers that it wasn't just going to be the 13 colonies, that we would push westward, and how we went about it and became the 50 states and all that sort of thing. So,
if we're worthy in the eyes of God,
yes,
basically,
exactly.
Right, and that was the gist of it.
But so that's one of those traditional American themes that Trump mentioned. As far as also keeping it on real estate, the southern border, he made a big proclamation about that.
That's what really surprised me too.
He was very direct about that.
Well, but he said something that honestly I was surprised he said. He said that he declared the Mexican cartels to be essentially terrorists. And I don't know if you guys realize the significance of that. That's kind of a legal classification. So by making the cartels terrorists, what he essentially has done is he's made it so that the U.S. So there's I'm not really completely positive about what I'm about to say, but I think I'm accurate. It's illegal for the U.S. military, other than the states. It's illegal for the U.S. military to be forward deployed in the United States. That's the essence of it. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's basically something that's been in a law forever. In other words, to prevent the U.S. military from overthrowing the U.S. government, or who knows what the original,
or the citizens or whatever.
Right. Who knows what the original, thought behind that was. So that means that's the reason that, like, for example, organizations like the CIA, they were only allowed to conduct their activities outside of the borders of the United States. FBI was inside the borders. So some of these original laws and, guidelines were there to essentially prevent any sort of overreach on behalf of the government or behalf of the military. You guys can, study history, you know what we're talking about. But what he did is he essentially has said that we are now going to make it so that it's open season on the drug cartels, and, classify that however you'd like, that are operating unencumbered for the most part throughout the United States. And that means that you're going to see a lot of special forces guys, a lot of guys that are, maybe sitting on the sidelines, ready to be forward deployed. And yes, I'm talking Navy SEALs. Yes, I'm talking about all those guys. They are going to be going to all the little crevices of the country, and they're going to be rooting these guys out. And I mean,
like the example would be the apartment complexes in Colorado.
Actually, the better example, Julie, though that's an example, the better example would be Northern California, because what county is it where they grow marijuana? Do you remember?
Humboldt, I
think.
Humboldt
County, right. So again, not an expert about this, and those of you guys who are in that part of the woods, maybe, or the country, maybe you guys in the literal woods, maybe you guys could tell us. But it's my understanding that essentially the whole region's been taken over, not by local California growers, but by Mexican drug cartels. And so, I was listening to another podcast, and they were saying that's one of the first places that supposedly the Army Special Forces are going to be going and cleaning house, or in this case, cleaning the woods.
That's right. I've heard some interviews about people who, and these are mostly farmers, whose land abuts actually Canada, and up in Maine and up in Montana, that they have problems with that as well. So I think it may be the great, decartelling of the country. We'll see how that goes. And in fact, I'm glad that you clarified what he meant by that. Why would you go ahead to the extent of classifying them as terrorists? It's because that leads to his next statement, where if you weren't clear on what that actually means, like what you just said, he said, well, we're going to use everything at our disposal, whether that's local police, whether that's the military.
The local police can't handle it.
But what he's saying is, we're pulling out all the stops. We're going to clean. We're cleaning house, essentially.
Right.
And if you're a bad guy, you've been put on notice. That's it. You are now classified as a terrorist, which means we can do everything that we need to get rid of you.
So you're talking about guys that have been forward deployed in Afghanistan and in essentially, real war, and they're going to be coming back, and they're going to be running off these
bad guys,
gangs that are running amok in the United States. I mean, if it takes 4 years to clean house, I'll be surprised.
Yeah, I wonder how this will affect, what is that community in Texas? I can't think of the name of it now.
The one down by the border.
Yeah, that was
near Houston,
that big
Houston.
House, that big new construction housing community.
But I don't think that was necessarily, that area in particular wasn't necessarily wrought with
maybe it wasn't
terrorism and whatnot. Those are just basically where a lot of undocumented types were buying land and doing land contracts.
They talked about deportation for that too.
Well, you're making it about real estate, which is good. So let's move on. The other thing he talked about was essentially the fact that, to quote the president, drill, baby, drill.
Yep.
And so what does that really mean? There is going to be opening up of federal lands for energy creation like we've never seen before. Everyone has talked about this in the past, but based on what Trump was doing even before he got inaugurated today, you can absolutely positively see that he is going to pull out, again, to what Julie just said, all the stops to create energy. Now, what is that going to do? Let's think about this for a while. And I'm, this is political, I suppose, but there you go. There has been virtually no real true motivation other than political backlash to lower the prices of fuel. Because the more expensive fuel is, the more I think people would seriously consider alternatives in terms of electric cars and all the rest of it. And so by lowering the cost of energy, or lowering the cost of energy at the pump by making it so, just focusing on, auto fuel for a bit and diesel fuel, you're going to make it so that the gas prices drop. And then people aren't going to be that interested in these expensive sort of, I think in many cases, questionable whether they're actually that viable electric cars. Now, I will say I'm not against electric cars, and neither is Julie.
No.
And the use case for electric cars is definitely valid. But essentially forcing people to buy electric cars, and he said it.
He's ended that.
He actually said there's going to be no more mandate. And I don't know if you guys know what that is, but I think it was 2035. There was a mandate that a certain percent of all cars that are coming out of Detroit had to be full electric. And that's been ruining all kinds of industry, not just in our country, but over in Germany in particular.
And also the car manufacturers, because as it turns
That's what
out,
I mean.
not everybody wanted to buy an electric car, and yet they were being required to make them.
Okay, so you're definitely in my wheelhouse on this one.
Well, I'm just saying, based on sales.
Okay, so even more specifically, Volkswagen, over in Germany, who owns Porsche, Bentley, Bugatti, all kinds of different things, is essentially teetering on bankruptcy, and it's Porsche that's keeping Volkswagen
I didn't know
alive.
that.
Yep,
That's interesting.
And it's because of nobody wanted the electric cars.
Yeah.
And if you look at, for example, the electric cars that the U.S. Domestic makers were making, they were certainly viable and competitive, but people weren't buying them. They were choosing other cars. Now, so what's happened? Hybrid and electric cars, for the most part, have turned out to be, on the secondary market, absolute 100% dumpster fires.
Yeah.
And so if you have an electric car, you guys know this, those of you with electric cars, the resale value on electric cars is really ridiculous. Very bad. Now, why is that? It's because unlike a normal car, let's say ICE car, which is internal combustion engine car, told you guys this was my wheelhouse.
Non-electric, in other words.
You were warned, yeah. An electric car, when it degrades as a system. So you have the entire battery pack that's degrading, but all the other componentry that's associated with the battery pack, it's like a golf cart. Basically, it's all going to go to crap at roughly the same time. And it's almost impossible to easily, or at least it's uncertain, let's just leave it at that, how you're going to actually keep these electric cars on the road, which means they are designed with obsolescence in mind. It's like a cell phone that you work for. Hey, surprisingly, it works great for the first 2 years, and hey, lo and behold, it starts having problems. And isn't it interesting? That's the same time the manufacturer comes out with a new phone.
Right.
So that's the same thing. That's essentially, people have been trained not to trust electric things, digital things, because they know they have virtually no value once the things grow old. And that's unfortunately the truth with electric cars as well. And you're seeing it, like for example. There was a whole bunch of, I'll give you, again, car nerdy, and then I'll bounce, okay? And we'll go back to real estate.
Yep.
So every 6-7 years, there's a new, it's called the, automotive nerdom, they call it the Holy Trinity. So you'll see McLaren and Ferrari and Porsche, and I think it could be argued Aston Martin maybe. They come out with these really ridiculous hypercars that cost obscene amounts of money that only a handful of people can buy, and blah, 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 blah. All right, so none of the cars that came out recently were all hybrids. And hybrids, again, are not proving to be great for resale as well. But then Porsche their Holy Trinity car was going to be an all-electric car. They pulled the plug on it and missed this cycle. So they're not even going to come out with their super high-end hypercar because they know that the total number of people that want to buy an electric car is zero. Now, what does all this mean? We are all in this world where we're sort of headed into this undesirable direction, really off a cliff, where we're all going to be forced, for reasons that, were supposedly all of in our best interests, the Green New Deal, which he also basically said he put an end to today, to buying electric cars and making decisions like they're going to ban gas ovens. That wasn't just some Mickey Mouse rumor. That was actually true. Julie and I live in Puerto Rico, and it's actually hard to buy gas here.
Yeah.
So we know that was true, and we researched it. Moral of the story is all that stuff's come to an end. And it turns out, just teetering on car stuff for a bit longer, there actually are lots of ways that you can use internal combustion engine cars and have them burn clean. Oh, what are you talking about, Tim? You can make synthetic fuel. There is technology, manufacturers that make fully synthetic fuel that the exhaust that comes out is not harmful to the atmosphere any more than essentially what an electric car would be, in essence. So the actual production of the synthetic fuel and the actual output of the synthetic fuel has essentially zeroed out the detrimental effects. And even nowadays with cars having all these different catalytic converters and fuel, cleaning things, there really wasn't hardly any harmful, but no one stopped to say, hey, what about synthetic fuels? They all said, let's continue marching in this direction after all the Green New Deal, and let's all have electric cars. That's at an end. And it's what that was doing to what Julie was saying, that was becoming an absolute non-starter for so many industries because people did not want to buy the products. How many other products that essentially are all seeing oligarchs, or overseers? They were saying, well, you guys need to start not just electric cars, but there are a whole host of other things that consumers didn't even really want, but we are without options. So if we wanted to buy that whatever, we had to end up essentially, buying something that was a bit of a compromise. All that's come to an end.
Yes, and that you made me think of something else since we're talking about inauguration stuff. That is an example of the government controlling our behavior, right? And Trump talked about that we're not going to be doing that anymore. We're not going to do the social engineering thing anymore. We're going to have, this handful of really big North Stars that will help everyone in the country based on economic security, prosperity, things that everyone can get behind.
Well,
versus trying to say, hey, you know what, you're going to buy an electric car because we say so.
Well, talk about meritocracy.
Yeah, well, that's a huge theme too. I love that. And he was very clear. So I'm going to tie that to one of my other thoughts here.
What does it mean?
Meritocracy is that you are hired or fired based on merit. Merit is that you deserve, you have earned, you are qualified, you have shown that you are the right person for that job.
Versus Elon Musk's joke that DEI, this is Elon Musk's joke, not Tim and Julie, but it's kind of funny. DEI stands for didn't earn it.
Right, exactly. Well, and again, people will try and spin that politically, but that is the difference between a meritocracy and something like DEI. Now, there can be people who were hired under DEI who also are qualified, right?
For sure.
We're not saying that. But what Trump was leading with is, look, we're going to lead with a meritocracy so that the right people are in the right positions. And that also translates through to pretty much everything, teachers and police and, stuff that happens in schools. And, back even when we were kids, they were starting to say, well, there shouldn't be a winner or a loser. Everybody should get a award for showing up, that kind of thing.
Yes, but this is one of the things that I've always loved about our industry, real estate.
Yeah.
Our real estate,
it rewards people who earn it.
Whether you guys know it or not, and you probably don't really appreciate this, but you're actually in one of the most competitive industries you possibly could have gotten in.
This is true.
You're literally street fighting on most days. Your boots on the ground street fighting. And if you're not operational and you're just buying leads and picking up easy stuff from your centers of influence and past clients, not so much. But for anyone who's looking to build an expansive real estate business, y'all know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You have to be in hyper competitive mode all the damn time.
You're earning it every day.
Exactly. There's very few industries that are like that, guys. Most of them have some form of controls or some form of moat around them. Not in real estate. You can be with EXP Realty or you can be with Sotheby's or some other brand, but at the end of the day, someone's doing business with you because of you. And if you haven't earned it, aka a meritocracy, outside of the centers of influence and past client handful of deals you'll do per year, you're just not going to be successful.
Well, that's why you have that headline all the time, show your value. That is literally what it means. That is what a meritocracy is. It is you having to show your value and you get rewarded as a result. Now, versus
Julie,
okay.
People that have been able to be successful or be essentially get business because they were politically aligned.
Exactly.
Or because they had some kind of inroad that wasn't necessarily based on, frankly, their skills, their talents, or their merit.
That's right. And so I think he was very clear about that going away. It'll be interesting to see what the commentary is. Again, we're recording this like literally minutes after the inauguration came to an end. I think it'll be interesting to see how people attempt to criticize Trump because he was so very clear. I was thinking about, we're coaches for living, podcasters, et cetera, and I was studying presentation style, directed, like he was extremely clear. And Trump has been criticized in the past of having, kind of wandering around and saying weird stuff, which I'm sure will also happen in the next 4 years. But as far as this speech went, I think he was very direct, very clear, said what he meant, stated how things are going to go. And my thought was, I wonder if there are people who disagreed with him or didn't vote for him but now are secretly relieved at the leadership, okay, that maybe we didn't have before. The clarity wasn't as there. He clarified what are the most important things that his administration is going to go after on behalf of the American people. And I thought he did a very good job being inclusive and showing gratitude of all the different factions that did vote for him. But it'll be interesting to see, because he is not confused about competition, for example, and that has become something that I've had this sense like people were uncomfortable competing. You know what I mean?
We talked about this the other day. Basically, the lack or the unwillingness to state or to acknowledge competition as being really the way everything is.
Yeah.
Everything is competitive. There's nothing in life that's not competitive. Every damn thing.
All you have to do is drive on the freeway.
Especially Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, everything in life is competitive. And to not acknowledge that, or to
suppress it in a sense.
To suppress it or to malign people who are competitive and successful, which is what's been happening a lot for a long damn time. This is not just in the past 4 years under President Biden. This has been happening my entire life, and I'm not a spring chicken.
Well, but that's what it leads to.
But so the moral of the story is that the whatever beliefs founded in Marxism, communism, wherever this stuff sort of germinated, of we have to be some big group of it's basically very pervasive in real estate. I have to say, I'm going to say it. But when you go to different, you and I'm stammering because I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm for a moment I'm not going to care. You and I used to basically go to these real estate events, and this is before our coaching business took off, when we started to sell real estate.
Right.
And we've been behind a lot of closed doors. Howard Brinton events is what I'm talking about. And I remember a Howard Brinton event in particular, where it was a group of maybe 50 or 60 of us, and we were all, you remember this, don't you?
I do.
We were all sitting around, and Howard was not, I would say he was more of a traditional socialist type. He definitely wasn't a kumbaya guy.
He's like kind of an even the playing field kind of guy.
Well, the dude wore Birkenstocks on stage. I mean, that just pretty much says it all, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so we're in this big room, and he kept on saying, things like, you got to share all your best ideas with everybody in the marketplace. You got to tell them what you're doing. You got to, everyone in that works for you is part of your team. You have to cross-train them so that they can learn all these things, all the rest of it. And I was listening, and I was thinking to myself, what the hell? This doesn't even make sense. I mean, how is this going to put me in a more competitive situation so I can win more often? And then I made a mistake, and I raised my hand, and I said, in Julie and I's team, and our business, we're not cross-training. You're going to come in and you're going to become the best buyer's agent you've ever could possibly imagine be. You're going to become the best transaction coordinator. You're going to become the best listing agent.
But you're not going to do all of the above.
You're not going to do all the above, because all I'm then doing is training my competition. It does not make sense for me to train a Tim and Julie clone Ford competitor in 2 or 3 years. I'm not going to do it.
Right.
And I didn't say it like that. I was much more humble. And he got so mad at me.
I remember.
He got so mad. I've never seen Howard yell at somebody before, ever, but he yelled at me in front of all those people because I wasn't sharing his sort of redistributionist concepts or principles when it came to sharing ideas.
Redistribution of skill in this case.
Exactly. And real estate has this ingrained sort of, it's from, you could argue it comes from the cooperation.
Sure.
So we're supposed to not just co-op on commission, we're supposed to also co-op on all the things that give us, competitive advantages in our marketplace. Guys, when you have a competitive advantage in your marketplace, keep it to yourself.
That's right. That's why some of our coaching clients don't want us to interview them on the podcast.
Chuck Williamson, I'm talking to you. I know you listen. He will not be on the podcast.
He's not going to share that. No.
And let me tell you about Chuck, and I'm not going to tell you. Well, I already, so longtime listeners knew about Chuck. The dude earns over $1 million a year with more than $1.4 million last year with 2 assistants. He does not want to be on the podcast talking about it.
He's not going to tell you how he did that.
No, he's not dumb.
Right. I know.
And even when we have our coaching clients on the podcast as guests, and we know them because we teach them their businesses, they don't ever share their best ideas, and we tell them not to. What is you
they
do
share
not
about 50%.
Why would you do that? Why would you give up? So anyway, the moral of the story is what I'm trying to say is that competition is real. And the idea that if you feel a need not to even use the word competition or feel like you have to beat the other agent, what's that costing you? What it's costing you is you're not becoming better yourself. You're capping or limiting not just the income you're going to earn, but the quality of the services that you're going to deliver to the consumers in your marketplace. You have made a decision that you would rather go along and essentially have everyone like you than you would essentially become more competitive and dominate your marketplace and then be able to service other people. And then all the other competitors will have to rise to meet your new bar that you've set higher. You guys get it? That is meritocracy. But what's happened in our country, what's happened in our industry is essentially the squelching of meritocracy, and that is wrong. And I hope and pray that comes to an end.
Yes, and here's the thing, and I'm right there with you, and I was very happy. I looked at you, I think we gave thumbs up when we heard the word meritocracy.
I think we high-fived each other.
High-fived each other. And here's the thing, because what has been the result of that squelching of competitiveness and of meritocracy? So if we take it out of the adult world and the real estate world for a second, I've read several books about, a couple of decades of this type of thing, probably more than that, right? And that is one of the things that they attribute the failure to launch syndrome to so many 20 to 30 something year old kids not leaving home. And a lot of the psychologists and people that study this have said it's because those, not really kids anymore, but those young adults lack the confidence to compete. They don't believe that they can go get a great job that they've earned. They don't believe that they can have a great spouse, get married, have kids, survive in the world, buy a house, for example.
They've been taught to think communally.
Yes, but they lack the stick-to-itiveness. They lack the confidence. They don't think that they can handle things. So they hide out with mom and dad longer.
And they live these. And so the thing that's sad about that, if you guys look at for what it is that, in your marketplace, let's say, you have the potential to be the best real estate agent in your marketplace. You have the potential to, earn tens of millions of dollars and make yourself amazingly wealthy.
Help hundreds of people.
And help thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. And in doing so, for you to become that successful, you're going to have to become the best version of yourself as a real estate practitioner. As you become more competitive, as you dominate, as you hand the market its ass, the market is going to reject you, be angry at you. We experienced all this when we sold real estate in Technicolor. Trust me when I tell you that. But then what's eventually going to happen is they're going to have to compete, which means the entire market, all your competitors, they're going to get better as well, which means who wins in the end? The customer wins.
Yes.
That's who wins in the end.
Because as a result of competition, everybody had to get better.
Yeah. I mean, look at, for example, I have a friend, I'm remembering, he's in one of these smaller European countries, and has socialized medicine.
Right.
And he has Adam. Have you talked to Adam before? Belgium, yes.
Yeah.
And his son, his 7-year-old son, is having a lot of health issues right now. And the local doctors, it's socialized medicine, are not doing a good job of diagnosing what his issue is. And they're telling him to just all these different things. And so he's now realizing, because none of the nature of the socialized medicine in that particular country is making it so that none of the doctors have a need really to solve this poor little kid's problem, because he has no choice to go back to them, because that's who he is assigned to as the physician. And then the specialists that one doctor might refer him to, they're a year out before they can actually meet. And they're in the same situation too, because there's no competition.
Right.
It's like walking into the DMV. Is that a good, pleasant experience for all of you?
But they have no competition.
They have no competition, so they don't have to treat you well.
Wait, cover there for a second. I have to tell the funniest story about the DMV. But you and I were still living in Columbus, and we were going to the dreadful DMV to renew some license or something. And it was one of these little buildings, and the line was out the door. There was probably at least 50 people in line, and we were moving like maybe inches per hour in this line. The funniest thing was this little old lady came out the door from doing her license renewal, and she's walking really slow. She goes, "When I went in there, I was 17. It was so funny.
One of the first things Julie and I did when we could afford it is when we had to do our annual renewals, we hired someone to go in there and do them for us.
Yep, still do. Best thing you can do for yourself.
We haven't been in a DMV in probably 20 years at this point.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, but the point of it is,
competition.
if you're looking to really get to the heart of essentially why a business, why a person is successful and why another is not, or not as much as they could otherwise be. It's the essence of what we're talking about now when it comes to competition. And if you look at not Ray Kurzweil, who is that guy who was writing? He was a hedge fund guy. His first name's Ray. He was writing all these long posts on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
He made them into a book. And he basically was talking about, and you guys will know what I'm talking about. I don't remember his last name. When I stop trying, I'll remember.
Yep.
But anyway, he was talking about how essentially, the United States was on the decline, and how it was going to all of a sudden, a peak. All these types of things.
Like the decline, like the Roman Empire and all these other fallen
Exactly.
empires, right?
And I listened to all of his explanations, and then he was real vague about what the hell he was referencing, and then those posts on LinkedIn. He was getting real popular during COVID. I mean, if you're going to welcome in some, I'd say subversive thinking or alternative views in life, you might want to do it while everyone's fearful of dying in the pandemic. So very quickly, these articles and posts and everything started getting a lot of attention. Well, then people started pressing him. Well, what are you referencing? And he said, well, I study history a lot. Well, history you just study. Roman Empire. Okay, well, the Roman Empire was around for thousands of years, and our country's been around for less than 300 years. And so to basically go and say we're on the declining, if anything, we're just entering into the teen years, really,
Yeah.
If anything, our country is just basically starting to walk on its own 2 feet.
That's what I liked about this inauguration speech. That it did feel like we're back.
Hard reset.
But in honor of the original values.
And so if you don't feel optimistic and excited, and you got to ask yourself, and this is going to be some interesting, I think, introspective thinking for some of you. If you are not sharing the optimism and the belief that your best years are ahead of you, I want you to ask this sort of odd question. How are you benefiting from those feelings? How are you benefiting from the belief about yourself? How are you benefiting from the belief that our country's on the decline? How are you benefiting? I'm not benefiting. Well, you are, otherwise you wouldn't be having those thoughts. So right now, if you're not feeling optimistic about your future, I want you to ask yourself how you're benefiting from believing that your best days are behind you, or, all the rest of it. How are you benefiting? And so I'll maybe get you guys going on a little bit of a learning curve. Having asked this question a billion times on coaching sessions, here's the answer. Because if you believe your best days are behind you and your tomorrow is not as bright as it could otherwise be, that gives you permission not to try very hard today. You're not going to go to the gym. You're not going to save money. You're not going to try to improve your relationships. You're sure as hell not going to learn how to be powerful on a listing presentation, learn how to be competitive. If you believe your best days are behind you, are you? You're not.
It reinforces complacency.
It's exactly. And so look, you got to realize that that's all in your head. It's just head junk. So if you say my best days are behind me, Donald Trump's president, doom and gloom, blah, 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 then why the hell would you make any effort today? You're not, or you're going to make half the effort you otherwise would have. What if on the other side, your best days are ahead of you? I don't care how old you are. Your all your dreams and your hopes. All your ambitions. That whatever you really put, whatever you put in your mind can be achieved in your lifetime. That you can have massive influence and be of service to millions and millions of people. That anything that you hope and desire with enough effort and enough, really time can become true. What does that change about what you do today? I asked Julie this question yesterday, and it's a question that I don't know where it came from, but it's fascinating, I think. I'll ask you again, okay?
I don't remember, so ask again.
Yeah, I will. You will when I ask you, because you had a very good answer. So if all of a sudden, let's say there's a technological revolution, okay, and all of a sudden AI and all these revolutions in healthcare and just all these things, all the stars align, and there is no more end date for humans.
You said you'd never run out of time or money.
Right. If you could never run out of time or money, because though this does sound kind of wacky, it's entirely possible that we are entering into, especially, and I think it's going to happen really fast over the next 4 or 5 years, where there's going to be every reason to believe that there's going to be essentially the end to some of the diseases that prematurely end people's lives.
That's right.
They're going to be, those problems are going to be solved. Oh, don't have to worry about that anymore. And also, it's very possible that there's not going to be a lack of anything because of AI. There's going to be an abundance of everything And the example I gave Julie, so there's these, essentially I'm going to use terms, AI agent. So an AI agent is like your super assistant. And what you're going to do is you're going to go to your AI agent and you're going to tell it, I want to create a business that that is similar to this business that does this, that has this, the other thing. I want you to go out and research whatever these 3 businesses that are dominating this particular space. Let's say you want to start a CRM company. That's a good example. You want to start a contact relations, company, management company, right? And so you're going to then say, I want you to go out and study, this widget, this widget, this widget. Then I want you to create something, and I want you to create a marketing campaign. I want you to write all the ads, deploy all the ads. I want you to do all these things. It's going to be able to do it. It's going to be able to do, now how's it going to work? It will then actually, in essence, work with other AI to go out and create this business for you. Now, the really advanced AI, like what I'm describing, exists today. It's just it's not available necessarily to consumers, but it's going to be this year, next year. All right, so that means you're going to be able to come up with 5, 10, 15, 20 business ideas. And those 5, 10, 20 business ideas, you could have probably never even deployed 10 of them or, rather one of them in 10 years, let's say. Now you're going to be able to do all 10 inside of a week. And so is everyone else.
Without the risk, without the speculation, without the capital expenditure, all of those things.
Now, where will the costs come in? There's going to be different grades of AI, or essentially AI that's going to be able to, like I asked AI to help me edit a book, and ChatGPT choked up on it.
Yeah.
But there's different versions of AI that are specifically designed for that. They'll give you, they'll put more effort and put more time into it, where ChatGPT at this point is still transactional. So there's going to be, versions of AI that are going to be specifically designed to be your widget that's going to make businesses for you. Now, what will that do? That'll make it so that everyone that's always ever had an idea or an ambition is going to be able to create a business. That means there's going to be a lot more options for consumers. That means there's going to be a lot more competition. There's that word again, which means that the quality of the businesses that succeed are not going to take a generation for the winners to be winners to be
dethroned.
No, throned. Coronated. It's going to happen inside a month.
Yes.
So there's going to be a new business concept that comes up. Everyone's going to jump on it. Everyone's AI agents are going to be busily creating it. And then next thing you know, there's going to be all these amazing services that you can't even conceive of right now. Okay, there'll be AI that's making apps for other AI. Okay, so I'm going to give you this one. And this is definitely going to happen this year. And Julie and I are in talks of maybe investing in some of these companies, frankly. You're going to be able to go and create, and we've been teasing you with this, but this is what's going to happen. You're going to be able to essentially have a virtual version of you, an AI version of you that's indistinguishable. Your face, your voice, your mannerisms, your everything, that's going to be essentially able to present, for example, on a listing presentation for you. Our pre-listing pack, which is coming with Ethical Real Estate Professional, that's part of Premier Coaching. The pre-listing pack pages, there's 14 pages in the seller pre-listing pack, 14 pages in the buyer presentation pack. Those pages will each be explained by the AI version of yourself. So you're going to be able to have, like right now, if you want to go on a listing presentation, it's you and the seller. Well, in the future, there's going to be an AI version of yourself that's going to pre-qualify the seller, that's going to ask all the pertinent questions, that's going to send the pre-listing pack, that's going to present to the seller on your behalf. And then I would say, frankly, in a lot of cases, you are not going to have to go on the listing presentation. It's going to be however you choose to do the business, frankly. But it's going to do all the heavy lifting for you. It's going to answer the question, your AI version of you, are going to answer the questions about the commission. It's going to answer the question about your easy exit listing and your communications guarantee and what you're going to do to get the home sold, your marketing plan, all these things. It's all going to be done for you, and it's going to be done by you, an AI version. How long is it going to take for people not to really truly discern the difference between an AI version of you and really listening to you? Like, at what point are people not really going to care that it's not actually you physically or on a Zoom or whatever that's discussing the different merits of what you're going to do to sell the home? They're happy with the AI version of you. How close are we to that? I don't have an answer.
Yeah, but they're not going to care as long as the job's getting done.
That's right. That's the bottom line.
And this is already happening. I think that we've all possibly sometimes not even known it, but when you call customer service for some of these bigger companies, sometimes you might be talking to an AI person that's taking care of those basic questions. That certainly happens on the chat helpers when you're on websites, right? I've had instances where I'm like, I'm not really sure if that's a real person or not.
But will you care?
I don't care as long as they take care of whatever my question was.
That's ultimately where we're going with all this. So here's another idea. And this is something you guys, we've been warning you about on our podcast for 5 years, maybe even more. The idea that you can build your business around marketing and branding is a lie. It just is. You need to have marketing and branding to support your business, not as what you think is going to be the ultimate lead generator. Now, I'm going to tell you why. Because you have to continuously spend money, and the amount of money you have to spend is going to get larger and larger and larger, especially with what I'm about to tell you. For sure, everybody and their brother is going to become a real estate influencer this year into next year, because AI is going to make it so every Tom, Dick, and Harry and Bob and Sally are going to be able to essentially create an endless supply of social media content that is done at an extremely high level, edited perfectly, saying all the right things. So you're going to be able to go to your AI agent and you're going to say, you're a brand new agent. You've never sold jack and you want to sell in New Albany, Ohio. You're going to go to the AI agent and you're going to say, I want you to go and tell me that, make a list of the top 50 videos that have been made by my competitors, that are getting the most views or the most listens, the most downloads, that are just resulting in the most lead generation. I want you to watch those videos. I want you to pull out the elements where there's the most where there's the most engagement, like where people are obviously taking action or just whatever. And I want you to make 10, 50, 20, 1,000 videos around whatever those top topics are. And I want you to create them using me as the avatar, obviously, my voice, my mannerisms, and everything. And you could even create them as I'm walking around virtual New Albany, because all that video is available. And then I want you to then push these all to, I want you to start creating a schedule where you're going to release 5 of these per day. Okay, that sounds ridiculously complicated, but it's not going to be. This is what I'm trying to impress upon you guys. You're going to be able to go to your AI super agent, let's say, and you're going to be able to tell it what you want, and it's going to do it all for you.
And that costs you nothing.
Now, that's the reason that we are terrified for all of you who think you're going to basically pin all your hopes on becoming influencers and social media rock stars, because everybody and their brother and their dog and their cat are going to do exactly that. The only agents, and this is like, where do you go if you're feeling terrorized by what we're suggesting, is personal direct contact. That's what's ultimately going to be the differentiator. People will always be willing to pay to talk to somebody, a real person, to have somebody in front of them, a real person.
To listen to them.
The premium service, the most, the people making the most money are going to be the ones that know what to say and how to say it, that aren't just basically buying leads through marketing and advertising.
Premium human service.
Back to why we do believe this is the entrance to a new golden era. There are going to be more opportunities for real estate that are going to be, and just for example, the opening up of the federal lands for all the, obviously energy is going to create new cities, because a lot of the federal land, there's no real civilization near it, right? So in order for these things, these towns and these communities to be built and these, these areas to be maintained, you're going to see completely new cities emerge. And I think you're going to see this also in California, where these horrible fires happen.
Yeah, new construction is going to be hot.
New construction is going to be hot. If you want to know where to place your bets, if you're an investor, I would say any, well-heeled, well-positioned builder stock is going to be a home run.
Absolutely.
And we 100%, like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are definitely going to come out of conservatorship. And that's definitely something Trump's going to do, at least from, we're not investment advisors or telling you to buy Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac stock, but it's probably a good idea. And then you're going to see a proliferation of new mortgage products, because right now the government controls essentially the type of mortgage you get. And when private industry is now going to, here comes that word again, compete with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, you're going to see all kinds of different mortgage products. You're going to see the cost of obtaining a mortgage and the interest rate on those mortgages go down because of competition. Anytime the government gets in control of something, think of an example where I'm wrong, dear listener, the prices go up because of the lack of competition. It's not acknowledging the inherent, the essential merits of a meritocracy, or how we are all designed to always essentially wanting to, compete.
Filter for value.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
one thing that I've noticed with coaching clients is that land is selling better and faster than I've ever experienced that in all of my coaching career or our real estate careers. And I think that's interesting. I wonder whether that's related to that expansion and builders gobbling things up, et cetera. And I heard an interesting back and forth on something I was listening to where the criticism of opening up public lands, people will say, well, we don't want to ruin our national parks. But in fact, there's so much government-owned land for between military bases and just huge hundreds of thousands of acres that have absolutely nothing on it. I think it's harder for people who have only lived on either coast to appreciate that, but all you have to do is fly from coast to coast. And I mean, even like you can, in Texas, for example, you can drive for 13 hours straight and not even get out of the state. And largely you're seeing nothing.
Well, I believe that most outside of Texas, because if I remember correctly, Texas, there's no federal land, and you guys in Texas, please correct me, but I believe that the Texas owns all of its ground.
I think that's right. Maybe Texas is a bad example.
And leases like the military bases and stuff, the ground that those sit on to the federal government. But the federal government and all the other states owns essentially most of the undeveloped land in the United States.
Practically, it's almost all of Nevada.
Right.
It's a huge amount of Arizona, huge amount of Idaho. It's unbelievable. So I think if I were in real estate sales, I would be cozying up to the builders. I would be making myself very aware of all of those new construction projects that were happening, what's going on with the land. I would be even more frosty about everything mortgages. This gets back to when you have a higher level of skill and a higher level of knowledge. Knowledge equals confidence. Ignorance equals fear. When your knowledge equals confidence, it adds to your ability to compete.
That's it. But also, when people are optimistic, the little analogy is, we were talking yesterday, you and I, if you knew you basically had you could live 130, 140 years, and you never run out of money. Let's say this is going to be it's no longer a fantasy.
Could happen.
I asked you, what would you be doing different? How would you think differently?
And I believe my answer, and I stick to that today, is I would even add more things to my bucket list, as it were.
Tell me what you said.
I would want to do more things, see more things, have more experiences. I'd want to get the most humanly possible. Not that I don't now, but I would be even more enthusiastic to do more and contribute more and to see more. I mean,
because what happens is, at any age, it's not just when you're our age, but at any age, you start deciding what you're going to take on as a goal based on the amount of effort you perceive it's going to be and the amount of time you have to accomplish the goal.
Yeah, you're doing like the ratio of time spent to time that you have left, right? And you and we were talking about how much, I don't know if anybody's ever studied this, but I think it'd be interesting to figure out how much of your aging is actually self-induced, because you think, well, I'm X amount of years old, so I guess it's okay to be 20 pounds overweight and bald or whatever.
But drill down on that. Don't worry about offending people. Yeah. Just you and I are talking right now and nobody's listening in. So like we were yesterday.
Yeah.
It's because your environment really does matter.
Your environment does matter. And how you're thinking about your environment and yourself, how you operate.
What does environment mean?
Well, it's where you live.
It's the people.
It's the people who are around you. It's literally where you live. It's also how you operate in your own household.
Yep.
What's your office look like? Do you have goat paths? Is that because you've given up on having a clean office because you figure it doesn't matter? You're only got 20 years left to live anyway. It's like how it's all related.
Yeah, it is. But it really, I'd say
it's even what you listen to. That's your environment too. What are you putting into your own head?
Well, I'll never forget the first time you and I drove a 1990 Miata from Columbus, Ohio out to Seattle. Right. And I remember the first time you and I were out west and seeing all the splendor of
it's amazing.
Montana and all oh my gosh, especially at night.
Yeah.
And it changed my life forever.
100%.
And then I remember when we were older, when we started our coaching business and we started doing events all over the country, and we go to these areas of the country, Southern California and these other areas where there were people our age or younger that were making so much money and so successful.
Yep.
And I'll tell this story just because it makes me laugh. I remember when you and I were walking down Laguna Beach, and it was like 5 miles stem to stern, and there was a really beautiful woman that was ahead of us. You remember this?
I think so.
Yeah. And there's this really, and we were walking faster than her, and she was wearing like workout pants or whatever. You guys are understanding what I'm saying here. And so am I being too subtle?
Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, we finally catch up with her, and we passed her because Julie and I are fast walkers. And she was probably in her 60s.
Yeah, at least.
But my point is
she had her act together, though.
She did. And where Julie Julie and I are from in Columbus, Ohio, I assure you that is not a normal occurrence.
No.
And so that's when we really started to realize what an environment meant. Environment, it's the air you breathe, it's the food you eat. Environment, what really affects you is what you allow in the people around you, but also the things you listen to. Things that the people around you listen to. So if, again, you're in an environment right now, which is basically thinking the next 4 years is going to be a hellscape, change your environment.
Right. And your outlook, right?
Yes.
I mean, I was going to mention Pam Bondi has her act together.
Oh, yeah. Did you guys see the new, she's the new Attorney General.
Yeah.
Like I went during her, whatever it is.
Her hearings.
Her hearings, yeah. I was like, damn, this woman is tough. I mean, she was taking nothing from nobody. And I'm like, how have I never heard of her before? And so I Google her and I research her, and Julie was sitting next to me. And I go, Julie, that woman is 59. Yeah. And the only reason I'm saying
she's fit, she's pretty, she's smart, she's got her act together, she gives it right back to him.
Yes.
She's frosty, you would say.
She's beyond frosty.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, I have to say, where we live now in Dorado and Puerto Rico, we're surrounded with a lot of people that have their act together and are pursuing things. We have amazing conversations with people that are 20, 25 years older than us that are like, hey, this is a company that I'm creating. This is what I'm investing in. This is where we're visiting this summer. I mean, people have their act together. It's awesome.
Have you been hiding your light in a barrel, dear listener? And for 4 years, 8 years, 20 years, maybe your entire life, have you been actually afraid to really become the fullest version of yourself? Maybe even afraid to let people know that you have more that's in your heart and soul that you want to express? I bet you are.
Maybe you need your own golden era.
Yes, exactly. You need your own golden era. And use this as your excuse to create your own golden era. Define what it's going to be. And, it's so incredible. We are all so incredibly blessed to be alive right now in this era, because we're going to be witnessing what's going to be a true golden era. We're going to be witnessing all these technological revolutions. We're going to be witnessing, how about this? Humanity going interplanetary. We're going to be, he did mention going to Mars.
Going to Mars, that was awesome.
I don't know if you guys are watching. Did you see Elon Musk jump up and down basically when Trump said we're going to Mars? Did you see that?
If you haven't watched the inaugural speeches, you should.
I mean, it's funny to say the word Mars and you get a guy worth $500 billion to jump up and down like a third grader at Christmas.
I know, it's pretty amazing.
But
I think the overreaching point, perhaps, of the inauguration event, and hopefully of our podcast, is just the unbridled enthusiasm. It's okay to be enthusiastic again.
Yes. Matter of fact, if you're not enthusiastic, if you're not optimistic, if you're not excited, if you're not looking forward to the best years of your life, you're the outlier. Yeah. You're no longer the person that's not part of the in crowd. You're now the person that's basically going to miss the boat. The world's going to pass you by. And it's going to pass you by at such a clip, like nothing we've ever experienced, because of all the things that you guys already see happening around you. It's the beliefs, it's the expectations that essentially this new golden era is ushering in. It's not just because of the president, frankly. It isn't. Well, though I do have to say, I love the fact that a vast majority of his administration are people that are in their 30s and their 40s.
That's right.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and that most of them were not career politicians. And he's got a lot of business people that are going to be involved. I think, the enthusiasm. So there are probably people out there that will not have enthusiasm simply because it's Trump, but you have to remember that it isn't just him. It is the fact that how many million people elected him.
Well, it's
the mandate, as they say.
The mandate, but what Trump? What we're going through now, this golden age, was destined to happen.
Yes,
because the pendulum had swung too far over to one side.
That's right.
And it
didn't work out.
It didn't work out.
It just didn't.
Turns out some of those ideas not so good. And so what's happened is the pendulum is going to swing back over. Now, want proof? We pointed this out the other day, and hopefully you'll remember the name of it. The number one podcast in the United States is no longer Joe Rogan. And I want to put this in perspective, dear listener. Joe Rogan's podcast get 13 million downloads a day. Okay? Our podcast, and it's a great day when Julie and I get, say, 15,000 downloads and streams and views and all the rest of it. He gets 13 million a day. And he does his podcast 4 days of the week. All right. His podcast is no longer number one. The new number one podcast in the United States I don't know if this will last, but it is, as of yesterday or the day before, is Julie Harris.
It's just simply called The Bible in a Year.
That's called?
With Father Mike Schmitz, I believe.
Yep, that's right. A Bible.
Bible in a Year. He reads passages from the Bible from Genesis on through a little bit a day. I think this podcast might be like 20 to 30 minutes a day, but he takes you through with some commentary and interpretation from the beginning all the way to the 365th day. I'm listening to it with Zoe in the car.
Yeah, I know. It's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. But I think, to your point, that is a demonstration of the pendulum swinging the other way. And if you pay attention to what happened in the inauguration, there was a lot of prayer. There was a lot of, coming together of that Judeo-Christian values, for example, and that, that's okay again.
Well, it's not only okay, but it actually has a more desirable outcome than when you're not actually
right.
when you're not essentially running your life based on Judeo-Christian values.
That's right.
Turns out.
And I also would, having said that, because I think probably there are people that might be triggered by that, none of it was extreme in any way.
Hold
it was
on,
all
I'm
very.
going to stop here, and I know you have a different view on this.
Yeah.
So it's. Are you worried about people being triggered by that? Are you worried?
I'm not.
Are you worried
but I think
about?
There are some.
Are you worried about people being angry because you and I are no longer going to try to pander to people that are overly sensitive about us being overt Christians?
I'm not worried about that at all anymore. My only worry is for people who so summarily judge and close their mind to it.
So I'm
not worried for us. I'm worried for them.
I'm going to take. I agree with what you just said. I'm going to suggest this.
What's that?
I would say that if we don't become,
then we're not congruent with our beliefs,
and we're being hypocrites.
Yeah, I 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we don't become more,
I'm not comfortable with that to a higher level than not comfortable.
Beyond spirituality, we're out of alignments. Yeah. We're not in alignments with our souls.
I agree.
And so that's essentially what appears to be happening to the country, because that inauguration was essentially nothing but Christianity, nothing about
it was very, very,
traditional
very clear,
values.
Very clear. And as I was watching that and feeling excited about it, I was also thinking, gosh, what are the thoughts of somebody who this doesn't stimulate into enthusiasm? How could you be critical of any of these things? Now, you could take any one of those statements and say, oh, he wants to take back Panama. How can we do that? That's the U.S. pushing a little country around. Well, I mean, you have to do more research to know what you're even talking about on any of these things, right? But there are people, and it's what I was talking about on our Friday podcast last week, about people who speak or judge with enthusiasm about things that they don't have the facts behind. So there's always going to be naysayers.
So, but let's drill down on what you're saying. So as far as
but my point is
people that could be offended by it, the people that could be offended by it, it's because they haven't checked their precepts.
That's what I'm saying. They're not thinking things through. They're
not,
just summarily judging.
But thinking things through sounds like we're being condescending and we're
I
not.
know.
They haven't taken the time
to study it.
To really study it and to essentially test their own. And this is something that, you and I do. Mm-hmm. And we ask our podcast listeners to do it too.
Yeah.
So when you believe something to be true, it probably is true, but you owe it to yourself to be checking your precepts, because you might be believing that something is true, or like maybe an expectation you have for yourself, or maybe you believe you're too old or you're too this or the other thing, right? Whatever it is. And you might be believing that because of the, essentially the, what would I say? All the people, your environment being part of it. Maybe you were raised to think a certain way. Maybe the expectation was when you are, if you don't go to college, you're never going to amount to anything, all these types of beliefs. But you need to stop, or you maybe are believing that Donald Trump is going to introduce tyranny. Remember all the stuff that was going on about Trump basically being the next Hitler and all these other crazy things? It turns out none of that was true. It was all a lie. Some of you are saying, well, we'll see. Well, we will see, but it's not going to be. And what you're going to see is something the exact opposite.
Well, he even said the whole topic of persecution of enemies and why everybody was getting pardoned in fear that he was going to turn it around in revenge and do the lawfare business. He actually said in the inauguration, we're not doing that. We're not. Yep. We're taking that. No, we're not going to empower the federal government to come after people and to have that sort of thing. He flat out said we're not doing that.
Okay, so give yourself some grace to allow in new thoughts, because what you'll find is you'll become most likely a more engaged person and you'll have a richer and fuller life. So if you find yourself like the best way, and I have these conversations with Zoe, right? Because everything in our society and our culture really has to be intellectualized, understood in a very pragmatic way. I mean, that's the way you and I approach business, and that's the best way to approach business probably. So when I asked Zoe to try to be in touch with her intuition, which is not something that even people acknowledge, but it's real. So when I asked Zoe to be in touch with her intuition, like, how did you feel? And it's like the feeling thing when she was younger, she was right in alignment with it. But I noticed now she's 11, she had to work to understand my question. So I said, and I pointed at around her heart. I said, Zoe, when you had that experience or when you're thinking these thoughts, how do you feel? When you're around that person, how do you feel? And then she described, how she felt about this one particular thing we were talking about, which was, of course, some friendship issue she was having, because that's what girls have at 11, I guess. I'm learning about this first time around. Anyway, so I said, well, how'd that make you feel when this person said this and this person said this? And she described it to me. I said, so, Zoe, I want you to think about trusting that feeling and not necessarily saying just whatever, it's okay for you to trust that feeling. It's okay for you if listening to somebody, even though everyone thinks this is the greatest thing ever, there's something about that person or something about that you're hearing that is not in alignment with how you feel. It's okay for you not just to be a lemming and go off the cliff with all those other people.
Yeah.
And, that's what I'm trying to have her understand, and you guys understand that as well. So if you find yourself in a place right now where you're feeling confused, where you're feeling your best days are behind you, where you're feeling sad, where you're feeling melancholy, where you're not feeling optimistic, all these things, you have to give yourself permission to check yourself why you're actually choosing to continue feeling that way, and go with what I said, the little psychological trick where you acknowledge the fact that you're getting a benefit from it. And it even expands upon that too. And maybe it's just because if you all of a sudden start rejecting, and Julie and I experienced this too when we were in Columbus, Ohio, when we started outperforming, let's say, the expectations other people had for us, and I've told you guys about this on the podcast before, we started getting rejected by friends and family and loved ones because we were all of a sudden breaking the mold. And by doing so, we were making them probably feel a little uncomfortable about themselves because how the table was set in the world and where they saw us and they're on that table, right? We were all of a sudden deciding that wasn't what we wanted for ourselves. And they didn't like that. It made them uncomfortable. It made them insecure. But what eventually happened, and it'll happen for you too. So if you're in a world where you're afraid to no longer have those dogmatic thoughts about politics, let's say, or abortion or something like that, give yourself permission to, if you don't feel that way anymore, to be okay not feeling that way anymore, and then to maybe upgrade your environment, upgrade the people that you surround yourself with. Go to reading different books and, essentially allow yourself the grace to become the higher, truer version of yourself and be more in alignment with your soul and monitor that feeling that you have. So if you're listening to me kind of stammer through what I'm trying to express, but it's resonating with you and it's resonating because you can feel a certain way, well, then stick with that thought, stick with that emotion. Think about what I just said and maybe follow through on that.
And you can just pause and say, that's interesting that makes me feel that way. Why is that? What if I felt a different way about this?
Right.
How would that be? Just try it out. You don't have to be all in on everything and just completely turn around all of your thoughts and beliefs.
And we're not telling you to start wearing a MAGA hat either.
No.
We're not suggesting that.
We're just saying investigate.
We're just simply saying embrace the new golden era. And
it's going to be good for all of us.
It's going to be amazing for all of us. It's going to be unbelievable. You're so blessed and so lucky to be on planet Earth at this right time.
Living in the United States.
Especially living in the United States. Thank you. So there it is. That is our podcast for today. That is how we feel after the inauguration. Hopefully we have educated you guys, motivated you. Now get into action. Hey, there were no commercials during today's podcast, so I'm going to end with one. If you're not a member of Premier Coaching, what the heck are you waiting for? Go to premiercoaching.com and you can join Premier Coaching right now for free. And yes, it does include a daily semi-private coaching call. Julie's giving me a look. She has something to say.
And we will return to regular real estate programming tomorrow.
Yes, probably, right?
Probably, give or take.
You guys have a great day.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.